Ladies and gentlemen, it is that time of year. It's time for my AFL 2026 predictions. We'll start off with the ladder and then we'll obviously go into all the other predictions. The grand final, who I think will be premiers, my grand final wild card, the Brownlow, the Coleman and the AFL Rising Star. Let's get straight into it and let's start off with my ladder. In first spot, to be minor premiers of 2026, I've got to stick with the defending back-to-back champions in the Brisbane Lions. Chris Fagan and his side, they are a dynasty like no other. They are a club and team who continue to be the benchmark of the competition. They have a stacked list with so much depth. The three-peat could well and truly be on. Whatever they lost in the off-season with players like Calamar Chi and Brandon Starcevich, they've gained new players like Oscar Allen and Sam Draper, to name a few. Can they cope with the off-field drama and pressure and media attention? We know that in the off-season, there's been a lot happening off the field with a few Brisbane Lions players. A lot's happened. I think they will cope with the media attention. I think they are a side who have a lot of players who can lock in, focus on football and be the benchmark of the comp. Hence why I've got them in first spot. The defending champs will have another spectacular year. Another team who will well and truly be up there in second spot, I've got the Geelong Cats. Can a player like Bailey Smith stay focused, lock in, don't worry about the media attention, focus on football? I'm hoping he can. They've got so much experience, the Geelong side. They're a solid team who will be at the top end of the table. We know that. This mastermind team and club, Chris Scott and his Cats Army, they are simply remarkable. Keen to see another strong year from those Cats. And look, it won't surprise us if they're up in the top four, that's for sure. In third spot, a team on the rise, the GWS Giants. I think they'll have the best ball movement in the competition. Clayton Oliver looks to fit in superbly with this team. They'll bring the pressure, the tackles, the ball movement. It's a breakout year for GWS, I think. Where they finish, I think it's top four. Obviously, I've got them in third, as mentioned. And I think they're one of the most exciting teams in the competition for 2026. They'll be on the rise and they're one to watch. It's a big sound in 2026 from the GWS Giants. In fourth spot, a bounce back year for this team, the Swans, those Bloods, eh? I think it's a bounce back year for them because, first of all, they've got Charlie Curnow. The goals come through there. Let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, they started playing some of their best football last season when they got their injured stars back, like Errol Goulden and a few others. I've got a really high opinion of the Swans going into 2026. I'm excited to see a player like Malcolm Roses join the Sydney Swans team. He brings a speed like no other. He's electric, the agility, the quick hands. He's always around the football. I think he's going to have a great year in the Swans kit and fit in really nicely. I just think the Swans are going to be a very sparkful team. Dean Cox and the Sydney Swans, watch out for them. It's a bounce back year. Here come the Bloods. In fifth spot, a remarkable story from last season, which this team can really build off. In fifth, I've got the Gold Coast Suns. They were the inspirational story from last season. They made it to the finals. They won their first ever franchise finals match. Now, a remarkable achievement to build off, first of all. And now they've got players like Christian Petrarca and also Jamari Ugle-Hagan. I've been watching the Gold Coast Suns in training, and I think they're working really well together as a team. They have to back up last season's efforts. I think they will. If they don't, it'll be a huge letdown. But I think they back up last season's efforts. They play finals again, and they have a great season. Dimmer and his men looking really good heading into 2026 season. In sixth spot, to make the top six and just scrape through for that top six, the Hawthorn Football Club. Can they stay fit and healthy? Huge question mark. Obviously, Will Day already with an injury before the season starts. Still, with a couple injured stars, we've seen Hawthorn in the past. They can still manufacture wins. They still have that depth and spark and that youth who really steps up. They've always shown that fight and spirit, and I think it's another exciting year for the Hawks. In 7th spot, gee, I would have loved to put them higher, but I've ended up with them in 7th, and that is the Collingwood Football Club. Do the old boys still have it? So close last year once again. They just got cleaned up in that prelim. As I mentioned, I would have loved to put them a couple spots higher, but I just think that 5th to 8th spot this season is going to be congested with percentage, and it's just going to be a really compact ladder, I think. I feel like they'll have their moments, Collingwood, and I think they'll still play finals, but I think there might be a few inconsistencies, a bit of a bumpy ride, but they'll get there in the end. And now we get to 8th spot. The Western Bulldogs, a team who should well and truly be in the top 4 with the list that they have. They've got one of the best lists in the competition, and they've had that for a very long time. I've got them finishing 8th because I just think they're a team who will once again dominate against those weaker sides. But when they do come to face those top 4, top 6 teams, I think that's where they'll struggle. And that's been a main storyline of the Dogs for the last couple of years. If they make the finals, which I think they will, gee, a 2016 repeat would be absolutely awesome, and I'd love to see it. But in saying that, I do think there's a couple stronger out there. But all in all, I think the Dogs are in for a great year, and I think they will play finals in 2026. In 9th spot, to get the first wild card slot. Obviously, the new wildcard system, controversial, not many happy with it, some are happy with it. Feels like these teams are just getting a second chance, in my opinion. The Adelaide Crows, I think, finish in 9th spot. One of the downfalls of the season, in my opinion. Minor premiers last year. I know it's a really big call, and I think they'll still have a chance to play finals through this wildcard system, but I just see them dropping drastically with consistency of wins, whether they can stay fit and healthy, whether they are the Adelaide Crows that we saw last season. I've just got a few question marks. I've got them finishing in 9th. I do think they'll play finals once again, but I've got them in 9th, and I know it's a bit of a bold call, but I'm sticking with it. Their crosstown rivals in Port Adelaide I've got finishing in 10th spot for the second wildcard opportunity. Although a couple big names aren't there anymore, they've still got a few stars who can turn it on. Will Brodie's going to be one to watch in the Port Adelaide kit for 2026. Obviously, they signed him in the off-season. I think Port Adelaide can definitely string a few wins together when it matters most, and I think they scrape in for a wildcard chance. In 11th spot, the Fremantle Dockers, and that might be a shock to many. They won 16 games last season. Yes, they were great, weren't they, at times? But at times, in their wins, they couldn't fully keep the opposition out. They couldn't fully shut that door in games for all 4 quarters. I felt like they always left that door open and gave the opposition a chance to come into the contest. Don't get me wrong, I think they can get a few strong wins, but when it matters most, late in the season, I see them struggling, and I see them missing out and finishing in 11th. In 12th spot, similar to where they finished last year, the St Kilda Football Club. I've got them again in 12th. I'd like to see a lot more from them, which I think they can provide. If they bring the energy that they had late last season, I can see them finishing higher, maybe around 10th. Maybe they do have a sneaky run and get that wild card chance. But I'd love to see it. But in saying that, I feel like they just miss. Have a good year, but there's still room for improvement. In 13th spot, and I think I should have put this team a bit lower, but I was going to put them in 16th and swap them with the team I have there, but I'm leaving them in 13th, and I've got the Carlton Football Club, and that's a really big call to have them in 13th, I think. They've lost Charlie Curnow, Jack Silvani, De Koning, Durden, but they did gain a couple Swans players like Will Hayward and Ollie Florent, who I think fit nicely in this team. I feel like their attacking style changes. For the Blues, I don't think they'll go for that, key forward, look for that big player like Harry Mackay to always get their goals. I do think it'll be a ground ball game where their small forwards get involved, and midfielders like Hayward, like Florent, and a few others. I still think they can get a few wins. Got a couple other players like Chesser, Ainsworth, etc. I'm keen to see them in the navy blue. and I'm hoping that the Blues can get in 13th spot, because anything below that, really tough times for Vossi and the Blues, that's for sure. In 14th spot, my rising team, the Richmond Tigers. 8 or 9 wins for the Tigers, I reckon. A season ahead, which will really give them confidence. They can really build off this. The youth in this team are really stepping up to the AFL competitive standards, and they're a team on the rise. I'm really excited to see them. I know it's a big call, but I'm keen for the Tigers, and I think they will improve and catch many by surprise. And now we get to the lower end of the table. In 15th spot, North Melbourne, the Kangaroos. They probably need 10 wins or more for Alistair Clarkson to keep his job as head coach. I think North Melbourne finish with 7 or 8 wins. A few question marks for me. First of all, around the defensive end. Second of all, if they can play consistent, competitive football for 4 quarters. Their midfield transition is good, and we saw glimpses of that, some of their best footy last season. But I think there'll be some promise, but a lack of consistency at times. And I see them being at the lower end of the table once again. Although there will be some improvement, still a bit of a tough year for those Roos, in my opinion. In 16th spot, a huge wild call, and it's probably going to come back to bite me. But the Melbourne Demons in 16th spot for season 2026. They should be a team who finishes 10th to 12th. But I've got them a lot lower than that. No Petrarca, no Clayton Oliver. It'll be interesting. They're under a new coaching system now. This could be a completely different Melbourne Demons side, which catches many by surprise. But I just have my doubts. They've got CJ, they've got Jack Steele, now they've got Brody Mychek as well, which are all positives, don't get me wrong. I'm not fully confident, and I hope they prove me wrong, I really do. I hope they can get to the Melbourne Demons of old, which we saw a few years ago. But I've got a funny feeling that this team could be the shock of 2026. In 17th spot, the Essendon Football Club. In the off-season, besides Braden Fiorini, they didn't get anyone else. They kept Zach Merritt. A big question for me is, will Zach Merritt play with his whole heart? We know he wanted to go to Hawthorn, but he stayed in Essendon. He couldn't get across to the Hawks, could he? Will he play with his heart? Will he be that same competitive, dominant Zach Merritt? Let's remember, ladies and gentlemen, Essendon had a lot of players out last season due to injury. But I just can't see it happening for this team. And I've got them in 17th spot. And I know many might not agree with me out there, but I've got them second last. In last spot, for the wooden spoon, for back-to-back years, unfortunately I have landed with the West Coast Eagles. I can't see anything changing. I think they'll show some promise in games, but won't hold out for 4 quarters of football. It's a really tough time for this club, and a very slow rebuild to get to anywhere like they were, obviously, in 2018 when they had that premiership and that great football standard. Unfortunately, I think it's back-to-back wooden spoons for the West Coast Eagles. Now it's time for my other predictions, my grand final prediction. And I'm not fully confident with this, and I struggle to narrow down on a grand final prediction. But I've gone with the Brisbane Lions, the reigning premiers, to take on the Hawthorn Football Club in the 2026 grand final. And I do think, first of all, that'd be a great game. Both have great midfields, and I think it'd be an exciting game of football. But I do think that the Brisbane Lions do the three-peat and do what only champion teams and clubs do. You have to be a team like Hawthorn in that 2014 era where they had those consecutive premierships. It is a dynasty like no other, and I do think that Brisbane Lions are a dynasty like no other. They will be the benchmark of the competition, and it may be boring for some out there to see the same team win it again, but we are privileged to see such a dominant team, such a dominant club be great footballers and win competitive matches of football so consistently. I think the Brisbane Lions do the three-peat and are premiers in 2026. And now, to get to my grand final wildcard for 2026, I really hope this happens, and I've got a slight hunch that it might. I'm really excited if it does. The Sydney Swans to take on the Hawthorn Football Club in the AFL Grand Final. That's my wildcard call. 2014 rematch where the Hawks won, or could it be 2012 where Malcheski got that goal and Sydney are premiers? Gee, that was a good game, wasn't it? I think that if these two teams get into the grand final, my gosh, it's just going to be a spectacle for football. We know these two sides have had their fair share of battles in the past, and if they can meet in 2026 on the biggest stages of them all, I think it'll be absolutely awesome for football. So my grand final wild card, the Swans and the Hawks in the 2026 AFL Grand Final. How good would that be? Now, for the awards, the Brownlow Medal. It's a bit of a big call, but I'm willing to stick with it. Isaac Heaney from the Sydney Swans. I love how he gets involved in the contest. Maybe a few votes get taken away from him from players like Errol Goulden and a few others. But I think he's a player who will be the leader for this Sydney Swans team, who will step up in those big wins. I love his ability not only around the football to play competitive football, but also his goal-scoring ability. He got 17 votes last year in the Brownlow count. The Swans had 12 wins. His average disposals were 23.6 and his average tackles were 3.8 last season. His performances and statistics were well and truly a bit better in 2024, the year prior, where he averaged 25.1 disposals and 4.7 tackles. And I think he can get to that level once again, if not better, be a leader for the Swans and get the Brownlow Medal. Now, obviously, I would love to see Nick Dacos get a Brownlow Medal. He obviously, I think, deserved it last year and the year before, but I think he just misses out again. I'd love to see him finally get one, but I just think he comes second or third in a really tight Brownlow Medal vote count. But in saying that, fingers crossed for Nick. He is a remarkable player and definitely deserves a Brownlow throughout his career. Wishing Nick Dacos all the best. And those Pies, I think they're in for an interesting season. And it'll be interesting to see if Nick Dacos can just be the superstar that he's been for the last couple years. My Brownlow Smoky for 2026 is Christian Petrarca from the Gold Coast Suns. I think he fits in nicely with the Gold Coast Suns. I know he's got a few other great players around him who will probably take a few votes of him, but I do think he's a sneaky chance to flash home in the count and finish in the top 10. Not saying he'll win, but he's a Brownlow Smoky, and I do think he finishes top 10. My Coleman medalist for 2026, who can get that? Who can kick away, get those bags of goals? And I think it's this man, Charlie Curnow, now with the Sydney Swans. He knows how to present well at the football, and the Swans have got heaps of players to deliver it to him on a silver platter. He'll fit in really nicely. I think he'll kick away. If he stays fit and healthy, I think he gets the Coleman Medal. He has about 74, maybe 77 goals to his name and gets the job done. Wishing Charlie all the best for a great season, and it'd be very interesting to see him now in the red and white kit in those Bloods colours. For the AFL Rising Star, so many youngsters who get their opportunity to play AFL football. It means a lot to them. And I think the AFL Rising Star can go to a player like Zeke Uland from the Gold Coast Suns. He's an emerging talent from Gold Coast. He looks to have potential. I love his kicking style. It's nice and neat. He's only a small player. He presents himself well to the football, and he seems to be a promising youngster for the Suns. So hopefully he gets game time. I've loved what I've seen in his highlight packages, and I think he's a promising youngster, not only for the Gold Coast Suns, but for the footy world to watch. And my other selection for the AFL Rising Star, still eligible. He was my pick last season, but unfortunately he did do his ACL before the season started. He's 19 years old, and I speak of none other than Jager Smith, who is in the Carlton Football Club. He was my pick for the Rising Star last year, and it was such heartbreak to see what happened to him with injury. Be interesting to see how his body goes after recovering from that ACL injury. Hope all goes well. Hope he has a great season. As I mentioned last year in my predictions, he knows how to find the football. He's got great awareness. There's similarities that he has in his game style to a player like Sam Walsh, in my opinion. I love how he moves with the footy in hand. He knows how to find it. He knows how to get out of trouble. He's a clever player. He's one to watch, and I think he's a great chance for the AFL Rising Star alongside Gold Coast's Zeke Orland. Enjoy the footy season. It all starts on the 5th of March. It's going to be a great year. Comment your predictions down below. Stay tuned across Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube for all my footy talk throughout this season. As always, ladies and gentlemen, you gotta love footy. Make sure to like this video, comment your AFL predictions below, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You gotta love footy. For more content, make sure to head to my Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Chuck us a follow, and stay tuned for all things sports.